Welcome again to the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys. Today we're covering the country of Australia, and you have one of my favorite people, one of my favorite international attorneys that you could possibly speak to, Stephen Page, who is a fellow at the Academy. Stephen, introduce yourself to everybody.
G'day everyone. I'm Stephen Page from Page Proven in Brisbane, down under. I'm a dad through surrogacy. Way back in 1988, I had my first surrogacy journey. I advised my first surrogacy journey, and since then there have been 1,750 or so for clients throughout Australia, and at last count, 32 countries overseas. It's been an extraordinary journey. I've had 3 children. My first child took a while to get there because my then wife and I had infertility. And it was one thing for her to have it, but when I discovered I had it as well, I was devastated. So I had that feeling that many of our clients had. We got lucky. We didn't have to do IVF. He came along, and then my second child came along. And as life transpired, I then had a husband, Mitchell, and we have a daughter, Elizabeth, through surrogacy. And that was a particularly problematic journey, more difficult than most of my clients have. But we've been blessed by that. And of my 3 children, 2 almost died in childbirth. And so I'm a great advocate to make sure that our clients have good quality hospital care, because I know what can happen if it goes wrong. Australia has a population the size of Shanghai, about 25 million. And in that, we're a federation. We have 9 systems of law, federal and 6 states and 2 territories. All have different laws about surrogacy. So this makes it a bit of a hodgepodge. And one of the things about surrogacy and egg donation is that if you are an Australian and you go overseas for an egg donor in the US, for example, you might be committing an offence back home up to 15 years jail. And if you are an Australian and you go to the US, for example, for surrogacy, you might be committing an offence about commercial surrogacy. 5 of our 8 jurisdictions have laws that can prohibit people from undertaking surrogacy overseas. No one's been prosecuted, but it's still the law, and there could be long-term implications for them if they don't do it right. So please, oh please, make sure that your clients contact me at the beginning of the journey, not the end.
And Stephen, I mean, you alluded to it, but you can assist them no matter which province it is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can advise across the board. And that's one of the funny things. If you have someone from Western Australia, they cannot get advice from a WA lawyer about surrogacy overseas. But I can. And I've given advice to everyone from every part of Australia, from the outback to all the major cities, to the famous places and the not so famous places, right across the board.
Well, and you, like a lot of the US attorneys, have worked with multiple countries, not just the United States, in terms of your clients going abroad for surrogacy.
I've had clients go all over the place. Australia is a migrant country. About 50% of our population are either migrants or first generation of children of migrants. And many of those go to places that you wouldn't imagine that people would go to for surrogacy, because that's where they've come from. So I've had clients go to, aside from the usual surrogacy hotspots, for example, the US, Canada, Georgia in the past, Ukraine, Greece, for example, just to name some, and those places which have been problems that have hit the headlines, aside from Ukraine recently, but India, Nepal, Thailand, Mexico. I've also had clients go to places like Ghana, Nigeria, Iran, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Uzbekistan, etc., because that's where they've come from and that's where they're familiar. I should say I've had American clients who have gone to America, and I've had Canadian clients, Canadian Australians who've gone to Canada, but I've had Ukrainian Australians go to Ukraine, and etc. The width is extraordinary, and Australians go overseas at an extraordinary rate. For every child born in Australia through surrogacy, 4 are born overseas. And there are more Australian children born via surrogacy in the US than in Australia.
Now, you brought up a little bit of that fear factor of some of the criminal stuff, but that should not stop them I would assume that the answer to that is they just need to contact you first. They need legal assistance on the front end.
Yeah, look, I had a retired judge say to me yesterday, "Oh, look, most of the Australians going overseas are committing criminal offences," and I thought, not through my office.
But they're getting home and they're having babies at home, right?
Not through my office. They're making sure they're doing it right, and sometimes that means taking very careful steps. With the United States, for example, it can make a difference as to what state, depending on where they live in Australia, what state they do surrogacy in the US. And as you know, the law across the United States varies greatly with surrogacy. I've had to become familiar with many of the states' laws in the US so that I can give advice about Australians back here to make sure that they can do it lawfully in the US.
Well, and that's the benefit of our network, right? We have attorneys that we can reach out to. And I know that I never do anything in Australia without reaching out to you. So those who are listening, if you need more information on Australia, if you have any element of Australia involved in your matter, even if they're not living in Australia, but they have citizenship in Australia, you need to reach out to Stephen. And you can get his contact information by going back to the Academy's website. We have a map. You can narrow it down to Australia and you can receive his information. The Academy's website is www.adoptionart.org. And Stephen is happy to speak to anybody, right, Stephen?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
I even listen occasionally.
You listen occasionally. I love it. See,
no, I love listening.
You feel comfortable calling Stephen like everybody else does. We appreciate your time today, Stephen.
Thanks, Kim.